have all these funds, so we have the water capital improvement and sewer capital improvement, then we just have capital improvement, which is funding the city hall. Can it be used for any of those, or?
I think as long as it's on a capital improvement plan, it can be used for any
Okay.
of that, yeah. And $27,000 will get you a match of some sort of.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Funding is funding.
Or a portion of it,
Yeah.
something.
So,
Any other discussion here, council? All in favor to accept the REIT tax increase, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, on to unfinished business. We're on to the B&O utility tax increase ordinance. Need a motion before discussion?
Make a motion to adopt the B&O utility tax increase ordinance as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion here.
and then this was also discussed quite a bit in admin committee. This is a tax, it'll be a roughly $11 tax on the utility itself. This tax can go towards general fund type of projects. Whereas if you do a rate increase, that money can only stay in water or sewer or storm. It cannot be used for snow plowing. It can't be used to cost overruns on this building or anything else that might come up. Currently this year, so far, we're not even a quarter into it. I think we're at $300,000 over budget, maybe even more. This increase in B&O tax will probably bring us roughly $100,000, so we're a third closer to drive this budget better. So I recommend that we do this. I think it has to be, is there more public hearings on this one? Or we
No,
just can't
This
take
is the only
it,
public hearing, it just wouldn't go into effect until May 1st.
May 1st is the soonest it can go into effect. This B&O tax in other municipalities, we're, once again, number one on the lowest tax schedule of any other city of our size or anything like that in the state. Most cities have a higher B&O tax, it's all directly passed on to the
It's
citizens.
passed on. We've been paying for it.
Any other discussion here, council?
I would just add to what Jeff said is, if you look at our other taxes, our property taxes are like only 60% of Cleone's, and our sales tax, because we don't have as many businesses, as a percentage of our fund, it's way less than like Cleone or Hillsborough out here. So we have limited abilities to tax, but a lot of the same needs, so.
And the loss of our biggest sales tax revenue, which was Harper's Lumber.
Yeah.
That was our number one
Oh, yeah.
sales
Oh,
tax,
that's
we
right.
lost that for 4 years now.
Yeah, and our property tax is actually lower than Kittitas or South Cleone. So this is one of our few ways of actually generating tax.
Without running a levy.
Yeah.
And we're trying not to spend a lot of money, obviously with our budget overruns, is just running as a city this year, so, the decisions we came up with, and what we think is best for our city.
Any other discussion here, council? All in favor of passing the B&O utility tax increase ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Next up, the wildfire prevention, I don't know why that word is sticking on me. Ordinance. This is technically just a discussion, we don't have to vote on this.
So yeah, this is just a public hearing on the draft, and we'll have another one when we finalize it, but we won't finalize this until we have everything together from OTAC and everything else, because this is a new chapter, and I don't know exactly where it's probably gonna fit best, so.
Okay.
We may not need to create a new chapter, it's possible we can incorporate it somewhere else too, I don't know exactly yet, we'll have to see when I get that draft from them. So this is just, you guys have seen it multiple times now, so this is probably a little bit of
Or
overkill.
fourth or fifth edition.
Yeah, but this does have, the plant list is on there
Yes,
too,
I got it, I
so
just saved it to go.
we
through
will
it.
be referencing some elements or some version of those plant lists that are included in there. My thought process would be to create a plant list outside of, that's not in the code, so that we can update that plant list without having to update our entire code. And we'll reference the plant list in the code.
Yeah.
That's usually the best way to do it. But again, those are discussions we can still have too, so. Anyway, this is the draft.
Okay.
No, did you have a specific?
No, I think
Well,
Michelle just answered that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see, is this been, when I opened it up, so it looks like it's been redlined already and corrected, and is that from the last edition that we did several months ago?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
attorneys had it, planning commission has had it,
Okay.
and we'll go back through all of that again one more time here with this other update.
Oh, so planning commission did go back
Yep.
through it, okay.
They've had it, they'll go through it again, but yeah, I'd like to just fit it into whatever draft of update we get here that we finalize with OTAC, and do it all at once.
So should I send you my notes from the previous one, cause there's some previous,
I think I
of
got
some
'em.
setbacks and things that they talked about.
I
with
might have them, but
fences
send them
that
to me
I
again.
like big flags I saw, so should I submit those to you?
Go ahead, I might still have them in the folder too, but.
Okay. Yeah.
So just, as I was going through the International Wildland Urban Interface Code and trying to understand some of the references and language, and I know there's references to, roof materials and building materials, and this may be something that's already in the works, but I'm hoping that that would also be considered as the.
It's already adopted.
OTEC's going
We've
into
already
that.
adopted it.
Okay, but is it still in sync with, everything else? As OTEC's looking at the, historic standards and the public works standards, are these in sync with that as well?
What do you mean by in sync with it? I
Well,
guess I'm not clear what you mean.
Are the roofing materials called out in the
So
wildland code?
Urban,
The Wildland Urban Interface Code just calls out a roofing type, like class A, B, or C roofing. So there's several roofing materials that would fall in each of those categories. So it's it's much more high level than like, for example, our architectural design review code, which only allows certain types of roofing.
Okay, all right.
So it would be
Different, yeah.
way higher level than, what it does regulate more so would be, the types of plants that you might have on site, or how many
Right.
trees you can have on site for development, those sorts of things. For our purposes, it mostly regulates siding and what they can use for siding. We're running as a two, I mean, incident resistant construction two, so it doesn't really change much, honestly, in the construction of a
Like I
home.
said, I didn't quite understand the language, I just thought, wow, I hope, avoid a hiccup if possible, but it's already
Right.
avoided, so thank you.
just
Yeah.
so the wood products, so you know, like the paint, it's really a clear spray to be able to use it like wood siding again, or
Yeah.
paint rather than hardy boards, which we all try to sort of state, right, because we like that wood.
Yeah,
It's a clear fire spray that they sell at the paint store.
okay,
It's super, I mean, they've really made it fairly simple to get there.
that's
And then
great.
what I found out through my roofer, because comp was an issue in one of my, number one districts because of fire sprinklers. And we found that most comps are already rated without even being fire rated, and meet the qualifications from the county. So there's a lot of basic things that you get sort of flagged on that you think, oh, wow, this is a big deal, but they actually are already incorporated within the building products themselves.
It's good to know.
Yeah, and so it actually doesn't really affect our planning a whole lot, just sort of proving what they're gonna present to us.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Any other discussion on this one? Alright, well, let's move on to the council concerns and initiatives. I just have one thing, I'd like to congratulate everybody with the mask wearing, and, just know that we are not required to, from now, for the next council meeting. Feel free to wear them if you are more comfortable, but, I'm not gonna instruct staff to wear them when I don't plan on wearing them.
Great.
That's all I got.
I've got a quick one. I received a, email from Kelly after, it was the meeting, I received a mail from Kelly to meet with a lady by the name of Jennifer Cash, who works in DC, and she's the legislative director for Congresswoman Schreier that stays in DC. And it was basically just to re-up on what we discussed with Theo's presentation this summer that we had met with. And they wanted just sort of a one-on-one with just sort of where are we at and what were our projects. So I had submitted virtually the same forms that Theo had done in just an email format of what the list of the issues were. And they were gonna take our projects directly at hand with them to see what they can do and what type of monies would be out there. And so they took the transmission line, and then, we also brought up several storm projects I put on that list also for them to look at, so they'll be looking at those. And during this conversation, they asked about, they were sort of jokingly, it was just Kelly and this lady, Jennifer Cash, said, well, how did your storm removal go for your snowstorm? Because they had talked to the mayor, and, so I let them know sort of the process that we went through. Michelle joined me on the meeting, so I had a second hand listening there, and, it sort of caught them off guard. I don't think they expected the impact of cost. And, you know, I directed, you know, what we did with the storm on our public works department is they really did a lot of preventative storm issue maintenance, and which, you know, if we were to get CEPA money, we would be able, or we'd be able to get support, not CEPA money, we'd be able to get that money back, right? If the county, and they're aware that the county did not claim declare a state of emergency, and they said that does hinder a little bit, because they're in negotiations with the west side of the state right now about the state of emergency and the flood damage. They're actually only into that right now of how much cost and what damage was done. They asked me to send a list of the costs that we did and the impact, and then what we've done to prevent the storm damage, and some documentation on that. So I just put a little spreadsheet of the cost that Michelle provided me, and couldn't really designate the storm time, but it was perfect timing. They were meeting with the committee the following Monday, and they were working on that themselves, and they said, do not give up. We will try to get you some type of funding to help support this. And they would let me know in the next few weeks as things progressed. And she sent me just an email and said, perfect timing, thank you for this, is perfect, and I will keep in touch in the next few weeks as things progress forward and see if we can capture some funding directly to help you out. So that was what I had.
Thanks, thank you.
Do we know if that includes the fire hydrant, clearing project?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
That was
it all
pretty
goes,
elaborate.
you know, it all goes into the hazards at that time.
Right.
And so, you know, I just basically gave her a whole list of everything and gave her just sort of a brief summary of how the events unfolded from our first snow that Friday and how the weekend went. And then, you know, basically we had a time restraint of when the rain was gonna hit that right after the 6th with that 7th. And from that point on, it was hurry up and get moving, right? We didn't have a choice. And I kept it fairly simple, and really a list, but it was great to find out that they had already had that discussion, and they were heading into it, and they wanted it. They said, can you just hurry up and give me a summary? We want to bring this to them, and so that's what I did.
That's great.
And so it was good news to find out that there is somebody fighting for us right now, and they're in the right place. They're in DC where the funding starts, so you know, it did hurt us. I will say this, and I don't mean to be bashing the commissioners, but not claiming the state of emergency at Burke County put us behind in negotiations for funding.
Yeah, I heard that from multiple.
Yes, it's a
federal
fact,
legislators, not
and
just
that's very
Sheriff.
disappointing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it may not have been Lower County, but Upper County, it was devastating to life safety,
Yeah.
even as an
Devastating
inconvenience.
in Lower County too.
Well, it was, but I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
we couldn't get fire trucks, we couldn't get an ambulance, you couldn't do anything for a few days.
Couldn't go home.
With guys that worked basically 24/7. I mean, I thought our public works crew during that, you know, that time were just off the chart supermen. I mean, they just put in hours and time and never quit.
For a rookie year for all of them,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
awesome.
Fantastic.
We couldn't have asked for better.
Couldn't have a better crew.
That we had,
Yeah.
Couldn't have had a better crew, so.
yeah.
So if you hear more, we'll keep you all posted.
One thing, we have a COG meeting coming up next week, and in previous discussions, they had offered to help us sort out grants. If we could get a priority list of our projects that we could use, and they will not only see what can be funded through COG, but also you know, if they can direct us to some other funding sources through the infrastructure, you know, act. I think Jeff, through the Sheriff's Office, is probably has way more information or significant amount, but that could be another resource. So if we could fine tune a list of the projects that might be appropriate, that we could then use to present over there, that would be really helpful. And that's next Wednesday, so it's time to do that. And then the only other thing I think Nolan at last meetings, he had a list of things that this time that he was going through, and one of them, I didn't have a chance to talk, but it resonated with me, which is thinking about putting together a rainy day fund for the future. And I know with all our budget constraints, that kind of sounds like it may be a little wacky, but to the extent that we could start to build a fund, because, you know, something's gonna happen. This snow event was like humongous, but we had a flood, you know, some number of years ago, a snow event. I mean, it's just a matter of time until something happens, so I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
too. We could schedule a budget retreat, June 14th. That's the first meeting in June. It's the 6th month halfway point of the year.
Just do it during council.
Yeah, we could do it during council, maybe meet an hour before and
Yeah.
kinda like what we did in the past, put up our priority list on the whiteboard, look over our budget, what dreams we have, what we actually can get done and so forth. I think it's always beneficial when we have and we bring in everybody, the planning, the library, and have a representative so we can all just talk across the board and make sure we're preparing ourselves for the end of the year. Have we figured out what we can spend our CARES Act money on?
I'll have to look again and see if they were still kind of.
Figuring it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
They might, the guidance might have changed by now.
I was hoping, because if we're stressing for money, so if we could figure out how to use some of this CARES Act money, it'd be nice if they figured out how we can use it, so.
To date, it's just capital projects that were faded. I mean, basically what we have that may be eligible would be maybe the sidewalk project in this building.
But
It
I
would
mean,
have to be something that was underway and was either cut from the budget because of COVID or something of that nature, and is also a capital project, so.
Postpone.
Could the
Yeah,
library,
postpone
could the library
or
fit in that as a project?
Well, that's what I just
We had
said,
a
the two things that we would
construction
have that
delay,
would be
Yeah.
And
potentially
costs went
eligible.
up.
Same as the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
would be this and the
Last panel
sidewalk, because we did
replacement,
have
yeah.
those actively bidding at that time,
Yeah,
so.
but this-
So
To
that
the other
was my-
note of Nolan was the sidewalk project, we talked about the tax lodging dollars last time, which I think we had $43,000, and where we sat with funding that sidewalk repair for the heat of summer,
COGS kicked in at 20 on
and we have
this.
20 with
Yeah.
that would give us around 63, and so just sort of curious on if that project is still, we're thinking about doing it this spring, and if we can afford to do that, and
I think last time we were talking about the concrete pillars or whatever were being
Right.
created.
Pre-assembled and inserted.
And are we still looking at that, or we haven't ordered anything, or?
Not yet.
What is, cause that's my last thing is
Well,
like,
we've gotta get the contract sorted out first with the attorney.
For base camp there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
would we need
That's
more
kind of what
funding
we-
to
Yeah, that's
design
what-
that?
okay,
Would we need to have more funding to throw at that then, if they're gonna design it in a pre-cast pit? In that
That's
scenario to design, pre-build
That
it?
60 was
Because
not
the original,
real?
obviously, the
Yeah.
engineering's not designed for that, right? The original engineering doesn't show that, so that's why I'm
No.
asking.
It didn't take into account, but.
No, that's,
it's
I
kind
just,
of
we would
a
take that
means and
same
methods,
engineering and
yeah.
modify it into a precast setup, basically, then is that all
For the
we
most
do?
part, it's just the difference about whether you build it down in the pit or
Okay.
build it kinda next to it and drop it down in it. It really didn't change the design.
Okay, just curious, just wanna make sure
No,
there's,
they
we're
had a,
throwing out
um,
another chunk of funding.
Yeah, they had a
to-
couple questions about a little different way to kind of bolt into the existing foundation there and whatnot, so.
I'm pretty familiar with it,
Yeah.
I've dialed myself into that project.
No,
quite
but we
well.
are, it's just waiting on the contract now, and then, as much as, it would've been perfect right now to have those things getting built during winter time, so when we get the right kind of, weather window and all that, we just drop them in, but we'll just work with what we got once we get the contract nailed down.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
All in favor, say aye.
I second it.
Alright. Yay, good meeting, good meeting, everybody.
Yeah, then.
So, growth and the swales,
Yes.
Deal.
so in essence,
You wanna read?
Yeah, I
in
know.
essence, what we're doing is
No, I want.
Well,
Monday. Can't wait,
I like that idea.
well, Friday, well, yeah, but Friday, yeah.
Oh, Friday.
School and, yeah, I'm counting Friday.
Solving a problem.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah, I gotta go to school next week.
Yeah, I know my boys like counting down the days. I'm like, sweet, man. Just gotta wait. You gotta send to the principal's office Monday. He had it on his nose and the library kept telling him. So she said, hey, go to the principal's office. He's like, yeah, you gotta listen.
He's gonna pass it.
That's what we call out the water swale or the bioswale thing. I didn't realize.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I spoke out of turn on the bioswale. Yeah.
Yeah, folks got opinions on them.
Well, I mean, I'm all for it. It's just I know the parking thing.
Cause it's like when you go to a convention and there's Idaho and Oregon and all that, you're like,
It's really tricky here.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a North East Street up there is a good one to
I was gonna say that he's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's
As much as
in
anything,
production
if
and
we
all
were
that, like,
in
no.
a situation where we were gonna have parking, we would
This is
extend
all
it
about
right
saying,
away.
Yeah.
we don't
Tom.
have 3 cars.
Anthony.
Anthony,
Yeah, and extending that right away in a way that may not be conventional is
You know,
really tricky.
it's interesting where
Yeah.
I see a lot of the roads,
Yeah.
they kind of sit off on one half
Yep.
line and then all this
Yep.
space. It's like, okay.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Physically walk.
But no, we'll see what they come up with.